Well, welcome. I'm so excited to be talking to you today. Let's get started and get into a little bit about your role, which is fairly unique and very different from most of the people I talk to in this series who are running innovation and R&D in corporate ecosystems. I think a lot of what you do is super interesting. So talk a bit about your role and what you're doing at the port.
Yeah. Well, so I'm VP Innovation, so I have the pleasure and the honor of enabling innovation, and that's already something I want to highlight. I do not run the innovation team, because in my perspective, the innovation team is the company as a whole, right? It's a mindset, innovation, the way to a willingness to see the world in a different way. But of course, that doesn't mean that innovation is chaos. So it's good that you have a team that facilitates, enables innovation, and we'll talk more about how we do that. And of course, I work for the Port Authority, which is responsible for many things in the port platform, the Port of Antwerp and the Port of Bruges, because we are Port of Antwerp-Bruges. So we operate two port platforms that are 80 kilometers away from one another. But my way of looking at it is not just the Port Authority on its own, but also the port ecosystem and the port platforms, because they represent an infinite amount of possibilities, use cases for innovation, in many different perspectives, energy transition, circular economy, safety, security, logistics, digitization, you name it. By the way, you name me technology, I probably have a use case for it. So I'm doing, maybe to the point you wanted to make, I'm not responsible for innovation in a corporate, but I'm responsible for innovation in an ecosystem,
Right.
a platform, and that makes it very different, very interesting, very challenging. But also, since you have a lot of societal impact in what you try to do, it makes it very rewarding to work on these kind of things.
Yeah, very interesting. And I have always appreciated your mindset and the way you think about innovation. It's very inspiring. What are some of the trends you're seeing right now in terms of what's emerging in, overall in the industry of transportation and then particularly port?
Well, there are a lot of trends, of course, but I think the main theme that we are very much working on and following up and see what we can do to make it reality is everything related to automation and then autonomization. So autonomous systems in the air, on water and on land. So we've worked very hard to make drones a possibility in the port, and that has expanded all the way into a vibrant ecosystem. To your information, well, when we started 7-8 years ago, we had a dream about deploying drones, but in that statement that we made, there were 3 legal impossibilities at the time. Now, at the end of 2025, we have 14,000 authorized drone flights in 1 year in the port. Our drones, but also drones from a lot of other stakeholders who want to make use of drone capabilities and drone functionalities, all the way to the beginning of cargo drones. Also on water with remote piloted barges, and now we are very much focusing on getting autonomous trucks a reality. Technology exists. We have a very extensive list of what we could do with it, even up to societal impact. And of course, in the middle is the regulator that has to move. So we try to, by means of a positive approach, try to inspire and motivate them to move forward. So, and then, of course, looking at, and one of the drivers for automation and autonomization is, of course, skilled labor. We always talk about the war on talent in society, but I think you have to skip that, and certainly in Northwestern Europe, start to replace that by the war on people. We don't have people anymore to do certain jobs. They don't show up, they are not there, and we lack already hundreds, thousands, tens of thousands of people in Europe as a whole, truckers, barge operators, licensed barge captains. So we need to come up with very innovative solutions to solve that, and at the same time make it an opportunity, right?
How do you, as you look at those very exciting technologies, what are the signals that you've used to kind of point you in the direction of your focus?
Yeah, we have a sort of a light framework to assess whether we should take things seriously and start to work on it. Now, of course, we have a long range, so to speak, radar. We have all kinds of technologies on it, even up to the level of quantum computing and so on. And then at a certain moment, we decide the time is there to start doing something with it. And how do we do that? Well, in our innovation portfolio, we have defined 3 buckets: exploit, experiment, and explore projects. And where a project ends up has to do with a couple of criteria, such as, do we think, based upon our own assessment and also your support, whether technology is mature enough to start playing around with it in the port environment, which is a complex environment, which doesn't mean that it has to be mature technology, far from, but it has to be somewhere in the range of it can be applicable in a port environment in a safe way. Secondly, do we have enough skills and competencies in-house to start doing something with it, or do we have a partner to do it? Very important, in order to implement the technology, do we need approval, which means often legislation or the lack thereof, because that has an enormous impact on your timeline. Drones, not allowed. Remote piloted shipping, not allowed. Biometrics, not allowed. Smart cameras, not allowed. These are all legal frameworks we had to work on in order to be able to use the technology, right? So stakeholders, the amount of stakeholders you need to get to where you want to go is very important. And then, of course, can you more or less find an indicative timeline? So exploit for us in less than a year, experiment 1 to 3 years, and explore 3 to 5. That is also that time frame, and all these other criteria are very important for us to assess the risk that it will be a failure or a success. Not that we fear failure, but it's especially important for us to have the conversation upfront with our stakeholders on why do we do this? Is this something we need to go after? Because certainly in explore projects, the Port Authority is 1,800 people. The majority are operational people. So you can't do like a pharmaceutical company, 10 projects with a time frame of 10 to 15 years. That doesn't work. We don't have that willingness to spend that much time. Mm-hmm. So if you have in your explore bucket 3 projects, max 5, but not more than 5, you need to have the conversation upfront. Why do we do this? Because we know it's risky. There is a higher chance of failure. It's going to take a lot of time. But the question that needs to be answered for these explore projects is, okay, we understand all the challenges, but if we would succeed, is the impact so significant that it is worthwhile to start exploring it, right? And if the answer is yes, that's fine. It also has an impact that explore project, we as a team, the innovation enablement team, we drive these projects because the organization as a whole doesn't have the willingness to, in many cases, pull a dead horse for 3 to 5 years, and then all of a sudden legislation is there and it starts to move. Where exploit, we are supportive, right? If the organization say we found a technology, we're willing to explore it, and you have a partner, and there's nothing else around it that requires attention, then please do, right? So I do not necessarily control all the innovation projects. By the way, what is an innovation project? It's a very difficult and, in my opinion, useless discussion. Every project has innovation potential, and it's very important that you define that and that you go after it. And if you need our help, fine. So that is the long answer to where do you decide to pick up something? It's not just a question of the maturity of the technology on its own. It's also the willingness of the organization, the non-technological challenges like stakeholder management, legislation, and all of that helps us define, okay, now the time is there. And if we're lucky, it's just the technology that we have to assess. Like a year ago, we said, okay, satellite data and satellite technology has been on our radar for a very long time, but we think it's more accurate, more frequent, and cheaper to use. So we're going to start digging in, and we ended up with a list of many potential use cases, and we start to explore and implement that. And for example, quantum computing is still a dot on the horizon. I haven't found my use case yet, although we're getting close. But it's not technology for the technology sake. It has to have a tangible impact, use case, potential to get going, right?
So it's interesting as I listen to you, I kind of want to pull on this thread of stakeholder management because clearly you do a lot of driving people to think about things in different ways and bring consensus and coalition around
Yeah.
these things to drive innovation. What's like a best practice or tip? I mean, that's a very complex process that you manage every day. What's your secret to success?
Well, the secret to success are the four building blocks of our innovation approach. First of all, two building blocks that are internally focused, which are not that unique. I think it's what every company can do. It's first of all, we do a lot of proof of values. We try to make the value of a potential technology solution as fast as possible tangible to the people who will be using it, because that proves that it can be done in a short time frame with a limited budget, and it triggers new ideas. Okay, that's one. Secondly, innovation culture. You want to have an organization that is innovative in its mindset, because as I already said, innovation is a mindset. It's basically, as I say it, moving away people from a yes but mentality, which is basically saying no, but I don't have the guts to say it. That's what people do when they say yes but, into a what if mentality. What if we could try that? What if we would be able to implement that? What if that technology would be for us to do something with it? That's the kind of thing. It's that intrinsic curiosity, that willingness to go to other places, new approaches. That's the kind of thing that you're after. And of course, you have to cultivate that by a lot of things. And then the two other building blocks that have proven to be very powerful, certainly in an ecosystem such as a port, is we open the port as an open innovation platform. We invite promising technologies to demonstrate their technology, and it has multiple spin-off effects. First of all, we understand what's the maturity. Can you implement it in a complex environment? Because there's a big difference between flying around with a drone over an empty field with maybe some 3 cows underneath, or flying around with a drone in a port, which is also, by the way, the largest petrochemical cluster in Europe. Little bit of a difference, right? So as a drone provider or a drone operator, you understand additional complexities that you have not been thinking about or integrating in your solution. So you learn and you're faster to make your solution market ready, so your time to market is improved. Third, we go together to the legislator, because I haven't seen a government on the planet yet that writes a new law to facilitate a startup with an innovative idea. But if Port of Antwerp-Bruges, the economic powerhouse of the country, comes in and says, yeah, we have demonstrated it works, we need it for strategic purposes, so Mr. Government, please help us out. Yeah, it's very difficult for them to say, go away, right? That doesn't mean it goes fast. Sometimes it takes years to get where we want to go, but nevertheless, we've always been successful. And then finally, one of the other things is ecosystems. And ecosystems are stakeholders, but ecosystems are also startups, scale-ups, academia, research centers, founding our own ecosystems like the Beacon in Antwerp, which is an IoT-focused ecosystem with different stakeholders, so that you are continuously inspired by what is feasible from a technology perspective, and then you can link that to something. And it often I've seen beautiful examples of spill-off effects. For example, a research institute in Flanders who were specialized in hyperspectral cameras, made it very small so they could hook it up to a drone, and they were using it to detect diseases on plants in agriculture. And they were explaining that to me, and I said, okay, that's interesting. Would you be able, using that technology, to spot an oil spill on the water? Because we're a bunkering port and one of the largest in the world. So accidents do happen, oil spills do happen, because bunkering is taking in fuel for ships. And that was the beginning of a innovative project to try to find whether we could use that same technology in a totally different context. Well, there you go. Now, at the end, it turned out to be another type of camera, but we use that idea in sector agriculture to implement in a port environment.
Yeah, yeah, that's something we take a lot of pride in too, is that our cross-industry disciplines enable our clients to kind of think about technologies in one industry that can be used in another industry in a different way. So very cool.
And that happens when you build ecosystems and start working together, because that's where the magic happens. If you stay in your own sector, you start to have tunnel vision, and that's not good. And all these challenges we're dealing with, and on top of that, if you try to make a challenge an opportunity, requires collaboration and different angles of looking at something, because otherwise you will never find something creative, innovative, new. You will start fishing, or you continue to fish in the same pond.
Right, right. I want you to talk about, you've done a lot of very interesting things, explored a lot of technologies. If you were to talk about your one favorite story, or when you had the greatest, coolest innovation, what would it be?
Well, we're particularly proud of what we've done in the area of remote piloted barges, meaning a barge where the captain is no longer on the ship, but is sitting in a remote operating center. And the starting point, first of all, the reason or the context why we facilitated that was something that 6-7 years ago was an idea with a startup who had a crazy idea to do it. And now that we have it in operation, is the strategic importance. You have to understand that for us as a port, and which is fairly unique compared to other ports, 50% of all the cargo in and out of the port arrives via barge, because of very good hinterland connectivity via canals and rivers. Now, the challenge is, if you want to keep that percentage, leave alone increase it because of mobility requirements or sustainability requirements, the problem is there is more outflow in the industry than inflow. More people are leaving the industry because of work-life balance and stuff like that. The average age of a licensed barge captain is beyond 60, and it goes all the way to 80, 85 years. So we're looking at a shortage of potentially by 2035, thousands of licensed barge captains. In the Netherlands alone, Belgium, same thing, Germany, the same thing. So that industry is under pressure. So the idea was, if we can take the captain off the ship and put him in a remote operating center, then he can control 1, 2, 3 ships at the same time. On top of that, a barge barge doesn't always sail. It's 40% of the time it's not doing anything because loading and unloading. So if the captain is no longer on board, he can do other stuff.
Yeah.
So in 2019, we met a local startup called CFAR, who said, we have technology to do that, but we need a ship and we need a place to sail. So we gave him a ship of a couple of million euros on one condition: find yourself an insurance policy, because we're not that naive. And we allowed them to sail in the port. And then together with the Flemish Waterway, we're responsible for managing all the canals and the rivers. We went to the federal government and the Flemish government to say, listen, this is strategically important for the competitive positioning, the future of the barge industry. Help us to facilitate it by means of legislation. And we got it 2 years earlier than anticipated as an exemption in the existing legislation. And now at the beginning of 2026, we have a final piece of legislation that supports all these kind of innovation. In the meantime, CFAR is doing this for customers, paying customers on a daily basis with ships, with cargo, all kinds of cargo, including tanker ships and stuff like that. Also, estuary barges, also short sea shipping is starting up. And now we as Port Authority are working together with other ports in Northwestern Europe, because if the Netherlands, Germany and Belgium are aligned in legislation, you have 85% of all the barges in Northwestern Europe covered, right?
Wow.
In the meantime, the shortages are so painful that the barge owners themselves have organized themselves to send out a message. They represent 1,200 barges saying, we need this, okay? And even the most conservative newspaper or periodic publication, the editor-in-chief said, listen, we have to stop being negative about remote piloted shipping. We're going to need it because otherwise we're going to hit a wall.
Right.
So the fact that we saw that coming and that we were able to make a small 4-people startup to a company of 50 people now, who are basically doing something which is unique on the planet, something that makes me very proud. And we're just beginning. It still has to scale, you know. And
truly changing the world.
Yeah, and what I really found heartwarming was They have operated now for 30,000 hours. The insurance company has figured out they are safer than a ship with a crew on board. That's fascinating, eh? That's fascinating.
That's really fascinating.
Yeah. But we're not at the end of the road yet. There's still so much innovation that can happen. One leads to the other, so it's a never end. It's one, it's actually a journey. It's not a destination. But also with the drones, it's a journey, not a destination, and that makes it so fascinating, right? It's not checking the box project 1, 2, 3, 4. No, what's next? What's next? What's next? What's next?
Yeah,
and then we got the legislation going. That's also very fascinating because, with the drones, flying around with a drone in a port, and it's also the largest petrochemical cluster in Europe. I can tell you, initially, a lot of people raised their finger, like, excuse me, what are we going to do? Whoa, wait. Yeah, well.
That is an absolutely fascinating, and I'm incredibly impressed. So you should be very, very proud. Let's move on to working with us. We're very established partners. We've got a great relationship working with you. Talk to me about what it is like working with Lux and kind of the value you get from us.
Well, based upon what I've said so far, you understand that I don't need suppliers, I need partners. What is the difference? A partner understands what we're doing, understands our challenges, and understands that we try to turn them into an opportunity, thinks along with us and inspires us and also challenges us. So in many topics that we work on, either in energy transition, circular, stuff like PFAS, for example, well, you have a lot of experts who provide us insights on, first of all, maturity of technology. They fill up our radar with things that are on the horizon. They give us different perspectives. They add different angles that we haven't seen to avoid that we get tunnel vision or that we only look from inside out. No, you provide outside in view. So there are a couple of things, like, for example, we have periodic meetings with your analysts on PFAS, because that's something nobody talked about 5 years ago. Now it's a big issue. And it sounds really strange what I'm going to say now, but from an innovation perspective, the fact that PFAS is a global problem is good news. That means that a lot of people have the issue, and a lot of people and a lot of universities, research institutes, startups are going to look at it, trying to find a solution. If you're the only one with that problem, you have a problem. If the entire world has a problem, you know that innovation will pick up and things. And I already see that 5 years ago, everybody said, well, this is impossible. But a lot of these impossibilities are now starting to become possible in some way or another. So with Lux and with your analysts, we make sure that we follow all these different tracks in PFAS remediation, measurement, immobilization, water, land, to see what is happening so that we can maybe even invite these companies and use the port as an innovation platform to speed up their market adoption, their market readiness, stuff like that. And we do that in many fields. And I see, based upon the feedback, that some of your analysts really like our approach because, you don't have that opportunity that much to work with an ecosystem instead of a company, right?
Right.
So that's where the synergy comes in. You broaden our scope, you challenge us, and that is basically that makes you part of the ecosystem.
So you're definitely a leader. And
I leave it up to others, I just want to have fun in what I'm doing. I want to believe passionate in what I'm doing. People always say that you're passionate. Otherwise it doesn't work,
One thing I'm making an assumption or a hypothesis you do is you work on fear and risk with people, right? That's a lot of what innovation is about. It's not just making a business case, but talking about the risks of innovation or de-risking a decision in some ways. You talked about drones and the fear around what that could do. And how do you work to de-risk the innovation or the technology? Um,
Well, again, the building blocks that I already described, you allow
yeah.
people to test the technology so that you have an understanding, okay, where are still the issues to be solved. But these insights are not just for us, they're also for the technology providers. So you co-develop, you co-collaborate, you're not just sitting there saying, tell me what the risks are. Well, they don't know as well, So it's by being proactive and working side by side that you take these risks, because innovation means risk. Otherwise, you're not innovating, right? So that is not a concern of us. It's inherently embedded in. Flying around with a drone is a risk. It can crash, right? If you don't want that, then don't start playing around with drones. But the benefits that you see in front of you are so appealing that you say, okay, we're gonna gradually and certainly with drones from a regulatory perspective, we went to the regulator and said, we understand that you have been tasked by transforming European legislation into Belgian legislation. And you're looking at it and you're saying, what the hell are we supposed to do with it? Right? So why don't you start here? Because we are a relevant platform for drone use cases. We're not interested in flying around with pizzas or shoe boxes or whatever. No, it's about really serious use cases. On top of that, you can do it in an area that is 120 square kilometers big, so big enough to have critical mass, where a lot of stakeholders are interested, and you have a local authority whose prime responsibility is safety and security.
Mhm.
So in anything I do on water, on land, in the air, I have to look at the harbor master and say, what do you think, Niels? Tell me how confident you feel and what I need to solve for you to feel confident in what I'm about to do. And that's how you work together to come to the solution and to say, okay, under these conditions, it can be done in a safe and reliable way, which doesn't mean that the risk is gone. Every time you launch a drone, you take a risk, right? But the risks are mitigated. But the same as you stepping in a car, stepping in an airplane, stepping in whatever, that's part of life.
Right.
But it's a question of how you mitigate that, and what if the risk does materialize and you have something that crashes or fails, then what? That's
Right.
also part of it, and that is the confidence you build in order to. But of course, to your point, because I understand the question, a lot of people, companies try to mitigate every potential risk. Well, good luck with that. That doesn't exist. It doesn't exist. And they keep piling up pilots and proof of concepts and temporary permits. Yeah, but that's not how you build an economic activity. We are not just interested in making sure that we can use the technology, but we also like to have a viable ecosystem that has customers, can earn money, so that it becomes a sustainable ecosystem. Sustainable meaning it's something that can sustain itself. Because if it's only depending upon subsidies and one subsidy call after another to keep yourself alive as a company or as a project and initiative, yeah, then it will eventually stop. Yeah. So if you have a lot of companies wanting drone activities or drone services, or a lot of companies want to have remote piloted barges, perfect, right? We facilitate that. That's our role. And some cases we also want to use the service, or we just want to make sure the service is available for strategic purposes for our competitive positioning and a competitive role. But that's pulling up your sleeves and be involved, and not just sitting there as a government, as a semi-public entity saying, you prove me that everything can be done in a safe way. Yeah, where does that stop, right? Where does that stop? And they go from one certification, then this and that, and that's how many innovations die, because people just give up and say it's never going to happen. Right? And in all honesty, with the drones, it took us a while, longer than anticipated, because we thought, having started in 2019, that when COVID happened, now we have one hell of an opportunity to use drones. Yeah, well, no, because, and first of all, and secondly, there was much less people walking around in the port. So what was the risk? Now, apparently that was not an option, or the government didn't move. And then 2 years later, when we thought, when is this going to happen? Then all of a sudden, everything started to speed up. That is, of course, something you have to deal with, because that unpredictability in timeline is something which is very difficult for you to get a grasp on. We have seen examples where it lasted longer than anticipated, and the opposite as well. Yeah.
Okay. All right. My last question that I always ask is, this audience that we're speaking with today is a lot of innovation leaders, but also folks who are aspiring to become a vice president of innovation someday. And I was on
Watch
your
out
LinkedIn.
what you wish for, eh?
I was
Watch
on
out
your
what you
LinkedIn.
wish for.
I was on your LinkedIn. You have a lot of quotes and some inspiring words on your profile. One of them I really liked is, "A gift is a gift and not a given." I thought that was really, really inspirational. What
Yeah.
advice would you have to those up and coming leaders today?
Yeah, having already said repeatedly or multiple times that innovation is a mindset, the starting point is my personal motto in life, which I think is very relevant also in the context if you inspire or aspire to be an innovation leader, is in life there are problems, challenges, and opportunities. But if you think about it, that's actually 3 times the same thing, only the mindset is different. If you can take that as a starting point, that's good. And then in terms of, okay, how do you get the machine of innovation going? A couple of, again, quotes, but they're basically condensed pieces of advice. No guts, no glory, right? That we even made a T-shirt, Port of Antwerp-Bruges innovation team, and on the back, no guts, no glory. Okay. If you want to stay on the safe side, don't inspire to be an innovation leader. Okay. There's another one linked to that. It's certainly if you're dealing with permits you have to obtain from governments, it's ask forgiveness, not permission, right? If you ask everyone who is involved as a stakeholder, can we do that? I can tell you 100% sure, guaranteed, the answer will always be no. But if you prove that it can work in a safe environment, in a responsible way, and not, of course, not out of legal boundaries, and then you say, listen, it works, and we want to use it, and everybody is enthusiastic, so can you please help us out to make sure we can use it with a legal framework? That makes a difference. And of course, in the challenging innovations, it sometimes looks daunting on how are we going to get there, and all these things and roadblocks and whatever. Well, never forget the other final one-liner. How do you eat an elephant? One burger at a time, right? So cut it up into parts. If you say, okay, what I mean by that is, if you're here and you want to go there, make yourself sort of a timeline with intermediate steps. Okay, where do we want to be, when, and why, and who do we need for that? And start calculating back from your goal and saying, okay, who do we need in order to get to where we want to go? Okay, you have to be very clear on where you want to go and why, and then start cutting it into pieces. And then that makes it easier to digest, and because trying to eat an elephant in once, that doesn't work. Ends up in hospital or something like that, or indigestion. So those are the couple of things. Okay, not very scientific, not very governance-wise, but they work. And we have 9 first of a kind in a port environment on the planet to prove that it works. So don't overshoot in governance and processes and governance boards and what is an innovation project. Less is more. Less is more. Simple things. First principles, Occam's razor. Simple or complex, simple is better. Poof, there you go, right? And you have to surround yourself with people who are what I describe warriors. People who see a goal and opportunity and they go, right? And you go left, they go right, you see each other on the other side of the road, fine, there you go. And not, yeah, but this and that and so on, and yes, but here, and yes, but there. Those people you don't need. Focus on the 20% who are really the guys you say, boys and girls, come on, guys, let's go, and others will follow. Others will follow. Once they see that this makes sense, once they see that this is something that can happen, To that point, when I joined, I was 10 months after the CEO had joined. He had already started a project or an initiative that was described, and the funny thing is almost the same in Dutch as in English, Delta, and it meant dare to experiment, learn, and trigger others. That was a clear statement, like, ladies and gentlemen, dear employees, dear colleagues, do something, and if it fails, we won't kill you. But it's more important you do something than just assessing what the risks are, because that's not how we're gonna become the successful company of the future. That was a real clear statement, and okay, I used that to get going. Did I have a plan? No. Did I have a strategy? No. Did I know that I was going to end up with 14,000 drones and remote piloted barges and what have you? No. But because you create that dynamic that gradually things become clearer and things become more tangible, and they can align it with strategic goals and corporate risks, and trends become clearer in what you can do with it. It's something that has to grow. If you want to harvest, you have to plant first. First, put a seed in the ground, treat it well, and then you get a nice crop. You don't get a crop out of nowhere. That doesn't exist, right? So, and yeah, that's the difficult part, and there's no magic sauce. But everything I explained, if you think about it and apply it to your own context, which is, by the way, very important. Our context is not the context of another company. Yeah. If you're in pharmaceuticals, you probably need to do something else, but okay. But it is a mindset. I've talked repeatedly to companies who are 100 times bigger than me, 100 times more money, 100 times more smart people. And some of them, at the end of what I said, they said, whoa, that's cool. That is not possible in our company. Okay, why? Because you have more money, more people, more intelligence than me. So it's a mindset, it's the willingness and so on. It's having that fertile ground, that statement, that mission, that C-level support. That's important. That's where it starts, because having big plans and everybody understanding, yeah, but the moment we stick our neck out of the window, it's gone. Yeah, okay, then nobody moves. It's as simple as that. And it's very obvious, but you see a lot of companies struggling with that, where they say X and they act Y. Voila. That's it, more or less.
So I have surrounded myself this morning with a warrior. So I want to say thank you very much. I appreciate your time, your thoughtfulness with the conversation, and it's been an incredible experience. So thank you very much, and thank you for your partnership with Lux. We so appreciate you as a client. Have a great rest of the day.
You too, Marisa. Stay in touch. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.